Welcome to Sufi Magic. The deeper meaning of this verse from Surah Safat must have become clearer to you. That why did Abraham contemplate upon the stars and lied to them about being ill? Because life, according to astrotheology, in the land between the two rivers and taking their everyday decisions, it had become an essential part of their life. But the question is, why did Abraham have to lie in the first place? The answer lies in Surah Anbiya. Then he said to himself, "By Allah, I will plot against your idols once you have turned your back and gone away." And what was the plot Abraham executed against their idols? Surah Safat. Then he advanced towards the idols and mockingly asked, "Why do you not eat? What is wrong with you that you cannot speak?" And it was then when Abraham shattered those idols with an axe and placed the axe on the largest of the idols. And when the people returned and saw this situation, they asked Abraham, "What have you done?" And when Abraham replied that it was the largest of the idols that had done it, "Why don't you ask him?" And they became embarrassed. But nonetheless, they decided to throw Abraham into the fire. But where had they gone altogether that Abraham got the chance to break the idols, as the pantheon contained some 3,600 idols after all? What kind of fire was it? And what kind of structure was it where they threw Abraham? Islamic accounts do tell us about some sort of a local festival where they went, and Abraham took the opportunity. And it is indeed true. In fact, it is the land between the two rivers where the oldest of the traditions can be traced. Their entire year was full of festivals. During my research, I found at least 6 of their festivals. Festival of the full moon, Festival of the harvest, Festival for the longest day of the year, meaning June 21st, Festival for the shortest day of the year, meaning December 21st, Festival for their new year, which falls in present-day April-May, a festival celebrated on a day when the great deluge of Noah had receded, because that was considered to be a rebirth of the earth. Nearly every month, they used to celebrate some kind of a festival. As per the bonfire and where it was lit, keep one thing in mind, that the land between the two rivers does not produce wood in high quantity, so naturally they constructed their buildings with clay. Even their large temples known as ziggurats. One of those large clay-built ziggurats still stand today, reconstructed. Not only their ziggurats, but in Iraq, on a site named Tel Brak. Professor David Oates, an archaeologist, discovered a large oven along with some large compounds. Was it some sort of a similar oven where they threw Abraham? Only Allah knows better. But when they threw Abraham into the fire, Abraham, at that time, was reciting these words, but Allah saved him from this calamity. As it is told in Surah Anbiya that, "O fire, be cool and safe for Ibrahim." Ali reports that if it was not given the order of to be safe for him, it would have become so cold that it would hurt Abraham with its cold temperature. After Abraham came out of fire safely, Quran tells of another incident. Saudi Ra reports that this incident took place after Abraham came out of fire. This incident is about Abraham's dialogue with an unnamed king, and this incident is reported in the verse 258 of Surah Baqarah. "Are you, O Prophet, not aware of the one who argued with Abraham about his Lord because Allah had granted him kingship? Whereas Abraham said, 'My Lord is the one who has the power to give life and death.' He too argued that I too have the power to give life and cause death. So Abraham challenged him that Allah is the one who causes the sun to rise from the east, so make it rise from the west." We have all heard of this incident, and we all know this king is Nimrod. The name Nimrod is not mentioned in the Quran. In Quran, this dialogue is between Abraham and an unnamed king, but the name Nimrod is in fact found in the exegesis. Mujahid ibn Jaber, who was a 7th century Muslim scholar and a student of Sahaba, reports of 4 kings who had been given the kingdom of all the corners of this world. 2 of them were believers and 2 of them were infidels. Those 2 believers were prophets Suleiman and Zulkarnain, and the 2 infidels were Nebuchadnezzar and Nimrod, and Zayd bin Aslam, also a 7th century student of Sahab, theologian and traditionist. He reports about this incident that it started with a famine in the land. Mesopotamia was suffering from a drought. People would visit the palace and would receive the grain, and Abraham went to the palace too, where this incident took place. Now, the mention of this famine is very important, and I will discuss it further in a while. But just like Quran, Nimrod's name is nowhere to be found in any archaeological record, even in the tablet named the Sumerian King List. The name of Nimrod cannot be found, although it contains great details about their 134 kings. But studying these 4 civilizations with extensive attention made one thing clear to me, that the civilizations in Mesopotamia gave much value to their real names, and as much of a value to their titles. Let me give you an example. In Surah Anom, the name of Abraham's father is Azza, but the experts of family lineage, including Ibn Abbas, tells his name Teruk, because one of them was his real name and the other was his title, and sometimes their title would become more important to them than their name. Another example is another king who too had a dialogue with Abraham, the king to whom Prophet Abraham told his last lie, that Sarah was his sister rather than his wife. Due to the length of that incident, I'm not narrating it here fully, but I will tell you about the king's name, which was Abi-Melech, which literally means our father king, which was clearly a title, whereas his real name was Akik. Further in the chapter, you will see that the Mesopotamian kings would often refer to themselves as shepherds, because for one, they would consider themselves as a guide for their nation. But there was another reason for this title. The word that they use for the shepherd king has another translation, which is the king who keeps the sheeps. According to the tablets, palaces of those Assyrian kings hold such warrior sheeps, bred and raised for one sole purpose, to break the door of king's adversaries, and king's men would then enter his house. So who was this Nimrod? Let me present you some data from Islamic and archaeological accounts that will help us to identify this king in the timeline of human history, because that would mean discovering the timeline of Prophet Abraham as well. Do you remember the Arabic literature, Kitab al-Muqal? According to Kitab al-Muqal and a 10th century Islamic scholar, al-Masudi, Nimrod ruled for 69 years. Kitab al-Muqal tells of another incident that Nimrod saw dark clouds in the sky in a very peculiar shape. He liked the shape so much that he instructed his courtmen and workers to forge that shape in gold, adorned with precious stones, and wore it upon his head, thus becoming the first king to wear a crown. The very same report has been given in the 5th century book, Adam, Eve and the Devil, only with a slight difference of the name of the person who forged the crown. But the biggest lead to track Nimrod in history is present in the very same verse of Quran, which speaks of Abraham's dialogue with that king. Did you not see the one who was arguing with Abraham about his Lord after he was given a kingdom? I had told you in the beginning that. Where did Sumerians had come from? We do not have any of the records that tell about their first 2,000 years. But if any king occupied Sumer and truly created a kingdom, it was Sargon of Akkadian, who lived 4,400 years ago. Tablets tell us that he was the one who had his great statues erected beside the bank of river Euphrates, and he was the first king who adopted Lord of the Four Quarters for himself for first time in history, or in other words, Lord of the Four Corners, which in fact, he was Lord of the Four Quarters in a sense. Akkadian in the north, Sumer in the south, ancient Iran or Elam in the east, and modern Turkey in the west. In fact, it was the king whose kingdom might have had stretched as far as modern-day Dubai and Abu Dhabi, according to my research, because there had come a time when 32 smaller kings had revolted against the Sargon of Akkadian, and then modern-day UAE and Oman were taken back from his kingdom. Do you remember the exact words of the verse? A king who was arguing with Abraham about his lord after he was given the kingdom. If you pay attention, it was actually Sargon of Akkadian who officially had a kingdom. And if the report in Kitab al-Makal is correct, where Nimrod had his crown built, inspired from the shape of the clouds, and became the first king to be crowned. Still, it was Sargon of Akkadian who was officially the first crowned king, because the mention of Sargon's crown is present in the tablets recovered from Akkadian. His grandson, Naram-Sin, had his official title as Ilu God, meaning the god of Akkadian. In fact, one of the tablets is inscribed with the words Naram-Sin, the great god king of Akkadian, O Lord of the Four Quarter. I, the scribe, am a slave for you. Sargon of Akkadian's kingdom stretched from Gulf all the way to Mediterranean. Its vast expanse and the tablets inscribed about it give an impression as if he considered all the things under the sky, all the earth or all the east and west, as his kingdom. And on one of the tablets he himself entitles him as Sa-Ki-Sati, meaning the Lord of the universe. Then a tablet describes that Sargon, the king of Kish, fought 34 battles. He reached to the seashores. He had war ships constructed from Meluha, meaning modern-day Sind, and marched as far as Cedar, meaning modern-day Turkey. He marched as far as copper mines of Magan and the silver mountains of Jordan, meaning that he reached as far as Yemen and silver mines of Jordan. I want you to pay attention to this verse from Al-Baqarah another time. When Abraham challenged the king that my Lord controls the matters of life and death, so he replied that I too control the matters of life and death. Exegesis of Ibn Jarir narrates further of this incident that, when the king heard this argument, he summoned 2 of the prisoners, who were already sentenced to death. But the king retained one sentence and released the other, thus declaring his control over the matters of life and death. The strange part is that during my research on Sumerian, Akkadian and Babylonian kings, I observed something special, a very special king, who was extremely fond of keeping prisoners. It was the very same Sargon of Akkadian, and there was in fact a reason for this. That Sargon was given the kingdom after he took over Sumeria, thus bringing him a large amount of Sumerians as war prisoners. And secondly, it is Sargon of Akkadian whose tablets carry obvious reliefs of prisoners. Do you remember I asked you to keep Zayd bin Aslam's report in your mind? That the context of this dialogue between Abraham and the king was of a great famine in Mesopotamia. It brought drought. People would go to the palace to receive their portion of grain. And it was then when Abraham visited the palace and the dialogue took place. Now, this is something very important, because it was Sargon of Akkadian whose daughter, Enheduanna, was appointed in the largest ziggurat of the land between the 2 rivers as the high priestess to worship the moon, and would write poems for the goddess of beauty, Inanna. This daughter of Sargon has been given another title in history, the first poetess of the world. And the poems she wrote are still out there on the clay tablets, and I want to recite you one of her poems that she wrote on a certain occasion. Ever since the cities have been built, it is the first time that no grain is produced. Streams do not produce any more fish. We water the flowers every day, but they do not produce any scent. Clouds appear, but they do not produce any rain. 1 shekel worth of oil has become of 1 quart. 1 shekel worth of grain has become of 1 quart. The one who slept on his roof died on his roof. The one who slept inside his home was buried in it. People are dying out of hunger. Enheduanna is speaking of a terrible famine. Is she speaking of the same famine when Abraham and King's dialogue occurred? It was the same Sargon of Akkadian whose wife, Semiramis, had declared herself as a goddess and was worshipped. She also had fire temples constructed on the banks of Mediterranean. They worshipped fire too, so was that the reason why they threw Abraham into fire? Only Allah knows for sure. I am only presenting you the leads, which give me a reason to believe that it was Sargon of Akkadian, who was also entitled as Nimrod. But I have yet to tell you the strangest part about the kingdom of Akkadian. 4 largest civilizations have lived in the land between the 2 rivers. The largest city of the civilization of Akkadian was also known as Akkadian, and it also the only known city, which was destroyed, but it is nowhere to be found in archaeology. It is the only known city in the 4,000 years history of Iraq, which disappeared from the face of the earth. We only know about its existence due to its name, which is inscribed on 7,000 different tablets excavated from Iraq. But even extensive search could not find the lost city of Akkadian. It is only estimated that it existed somewhere near to the modern-day Baghdad. Archaeologists working at a site named Tel Leilan that one of the causes for the end of Akkadian Empire was a great famine caused due to the changes in the river Tigris and Euphrates, because excavations in the rest of the cities show their grain and the sand and dust in the ziggurats are somehow showing a sudden seizure of the human activity. The dirt samples show that the earth forms had been ceased from developing, which proves that the rain had ceased to pour. The city was abandoned, but still, these causes do not explain the disappearance of the city of Akkadian from the face of the earth. The city vanished in a way that we know of it only because it is mentioned in the tablets. But I will give you one explanation of the disappearance of this city. According to the exegesis of Ibn Kathir, the unnamed king was given the dawah 3 times, but he refused each time, until mosquitoes were released upon them. They descended upon them in such large numbers that it blocked the sun, and within moments, the mosquitoes licked their flesh and drank their blood. One of those mosquitoes entered the king's nostrils, eventually leading him to a very slow and an agonizing death, banging his head on the walls and the stones. People of the city either escaped, or died with it, or abandoned it, and this explains the sudden halt of the human activity in the city. But what kind of creature were those mosquitoes? Perhaps no one will ever know, but one thing is for sure, that without any incident of such horrible magnitude, one can never explain the complete disappearance of the city of Akkadian. I am aware that many of you must be thinking that, if the people of the land between the 2 rivers were so accomplished in their knowledge, if the Sumerians had discovered such a refined form of mathematics that enabled them to accurately predict the movement of celestial objects, if the Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians were so confidently making prophecies due to their knowledge of stars, that a great flood will come, breaking the dam with its might, and the king then must write to me, or the priests of Nimrod informed him about the birth of such a child, who will end their religion. So where is that knowledge now? What happened to it? The answer will perhaps surprise you. A French astronomer in 1792 AD Pierre Joseph de Beauchamp visited Iraq. He went to Babylon and observed certain traces of astrotheology and astrology, and noted those observations down in his notebook. But the notebook reached into the hands of British East India Company after his death, who, without a second thought, ordered their agents to reach the cities of Basra and Baghdad, so they could collect these artifacts and relics as soon as possible and transfer them to London, especially the ones mentioned in Pierre Joseph's diary. In the year 1855 AD, those tablets and relics were laden on 5 ships and were being transported to London through the river Tigris. But then, those ships were attacked by sea pirates, and all those 5 ships, along with their more than 200 tablets and ancient relics, drowned into the depths of river Tigris. But British East India Company had become aware of the importance of knowledge on these tablets, and they were determined to retrieve that knowledge at any cost, and to retrieve that lost cargo. British resident of that time in Iraq hired the help of Ottomans, but by then, French crown too had become aware of Pierre Joseph's diary, and they too wanted to acquire those tablets. So they too dispatched their own mission to the river Tigris, called the Fresnel Mission. But nobody could find those tablets. But something way too precious was in those tablets that 100 years later, in the year 1971 AD, even the Japanese ships kept on trying to recover those tablets from the Tigris, but it seems that they are lost forever. Who were those pirates, and where did those tablets go? In my personal opinion, they were some kind of guardians, either protecting that knowledge from the world or protecting the world from the dangers of that knowledge. Perhaps that is why they drowned all 5 ships full of Sumerian tablets into the river Tigris, nowhere to be found until today. Nobody saw those pirates again. Perhaps the Sumerian tablets of Tigris are lost forever, but the land between these 2 rivers was still a battleground for that knowledge. In 1899, Germany started their excavation in the Temple of Marduk, and whatever samples did they excavated, they transported them to Germany in bulks. In fact, England became so edgy over Germany acquiring all that knowledge that in 1917 England sent their troops to Iraq. But before the troops reached Iraq, German archaeologists escaped, leaving nothing for the British soldiers to be found. But let me tell you something even more strange. All the data extracted from these tablets is older than 1987, presented to public after translation, but all those tablets excavated after 1987. Not a bit of the data from those tablets has been released for public. Allah knows what kind of knowledges have they extracted from those tablets. All of you would know about a project Saddam Hussein started by the name of Archaeological Restoration of Babylon, in which Nebuchadnezzar's 250 rooms palace, their largest ziggurat, a museum and famous hanging gardens of Babylon were supposed to be built, of which I'll tell you in the 17th chapter. But in 2011, a journalist by the name of Mariam Musa reported something important that took place in that museum. Saddam Hussein had the replicas of those tablets created, and it was then when America invaded Iraq in 2003, and exactly on the archaeological site of ancient city of Babylon, they set up their military camp called Camp Alpha, and for the next 2 whole years, American and Polish troops caused havoc. Replicas of the tablets that were created, 2 museums and a library was destroyed by them, and in 2005, returned the charge to State Board of Heritage of Iraq in irreparable condition. There is another report available on this demolished by British Museum Director John Curtis, which can bring tears to one's eyes to see how they looted the heritage and cultural treasures of a Muslim country, looting their knowledge. About all this mad rampage, in 2006, an American Colonel John Coleman said something very strange, and I'm quoting him word by word to you. that the damage that has been caused there by the presence of American military, we are sorry for that. But it is also a fact that the presence of US military there, other looters were kept at bay. God knows to whom was he delivering this message? To British Museum? To French? Or Japanese? Who are all after that knowledge since past 300 years? If I be honest, then the sea pirates who drowned 5 ships of British East India Company in the River Tigris, they certainly were some kind of guardians. Who knew that? This knowledge must not reach the world. What knowledge has been extracted from the tablets after 1987 that are forbidden to be released in the public? What knowledge was it that was drowned into the depths of Tigris? And have never been found regardless of countless attempts? Only Allah knows well. But there was another kind of knowledge, which may also appear to be lost forever, far more noble than the knowledge on the tablets, far more respectful scriptures of Prophet Abraham, one of the oldest among the divine scriptures, mentioned in both Surah Elah and Surah Najm, and on both places in Surah Fatih and Surah Al-Imran. There is almost a similar verse, where there is something mentioned other than miracles and scriptures, a radiant book, and majority of the scholars today are convinced that Kitab al-Munir too was once a holy book. But why did I say that? It seems as if those scriptures are lost. Go to Surah Al-Alah and behold what is mentioned in its 18th verse. These things were in the ancient scriptures too, the scriptures of Musa and Abraham. What things? A glimpse of those teachings is from the 36th verse of Surah Najm onwards. Has he not been informed of what is in the scriptures of Musa and that of Abraham, who fulfilled his covenant? That no soul burdened with sin will bear the burden of another. Each person will only have what he endeavored towards. The outcome of his endeavor will soon be judged. Then he will fully be rewarded. To your Lord alone is the ultimate return of all things. To your Lord alone is the ultimate return of all things. He is the one who brings about joy and sadness. He is the one who gives life and causes death. He created pairs, males and the females. From the sperm drop, when it is emitted, it is upon him to bring about recreation. He is the one who riches and impoverishes. He alone is the Lord of the star Sirius. He destroyed the first people of Od, and then Thamud, sparing no one. And before that he destroyed the people of Nu, who were truly far worse in wrongdoing and transgression. It is he who turned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah upside down. Sometimes when you hear the words of Quran, your heart testifies that this can never be the word of a human being. The verses of Surah Najm that I recited, the beginning of these verses tell that the same speech was in the scriptures of Abraham, to call the man towards his creator Allah. At the end of this chapter, I want to say something to all of you. Did you ponder even for a little bit that why Allah did not tell the name of that king? Did you notice how the people of the land between the two rivers used to give themselves the titles? The title of Teruk, father of Prophet Abraham, was Uzza, or the title of King Akik was Obi-Molech, or the Sargon of Akkadian used to entitle himself the Lord of Four Quarters, or the Lord of East and West, or the Lord of the Universe, or the title of Naran Sin was the Lord of Akkadian. All of these people lived at the time of Abraham, used to give themselves incredible titles, but today we don't even know the real name of that unnamed king. Allah took away his name and let him be lost in the history. One who used to untitle himself as the Lord of everything under the sky. His true name cannot be found even in a single tablet. And compared to all of them, Allah also gave Abraham a title a title found in the 125th verse of Surah Nisa. Allah chose Abraham as his friend, and the friend chosen by Allah. Today, 30 nations of the world trace their genealogy back to him. He is mentioned in 35 chapters of Quran, and according to the Hadith of Miraj reported by Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, this friend of Allah was seen by Prophet Muhammad in the seventh heaven, sitting by the wall of Bayt al-Mamur, under the kind of tree whose leaves are like radiant lamps.